This T6 van is owned by Steve the Chippy. Steve the Chippy carries out a lot of the building maintenance here at Just Kampers. Recently the van had failed its MOT, so Steve was thinking about upgrading to a newer van. But after looking into the payments, Steve quickly realised it was far more cost effective to repair his current van. The major defects on this van which failed the MOT include the front shock absorber leaking oil and not functioning correctly, the power steering pump itself leaking oil, and the windscreen washers not working. The minor advisories from the MOT test turned out really just to be service items. Brake pads, tyres. Now, this 2015 T6 van has covered 87,000 miles with a full dealer service history. With the aid of Steve's Builder's Wagon, I'm going to show you how to replace your front shock absorbers on a Transporter T6. Although only one shock absorber failed the MOT on Steve's van, when fitting suspension components, it's highly advisable to fit them in pairs. Our first job in suspension removal is to remove the wiper blades, believe it or not. I need to take the wiper blades off so I can remove the scuttle underneath the windscreen, and that allows us access to the top of the mounts for the suspension strut. As you can see, I've taped a bit of paper to the windscreen. The reason I've done that is so that I can draw either side of our wiper blade, so when I remove and replace, I can put them back in the correct position. So I've done that for both sides. You can use a bit of masking tape and a pen, but I had some paper to hand. I'm going to pop a little bit of spray, penetrating spray, down the spindle of our wiper arm, as sometimes removing the wiper arms can be a little bit tricky. Okay, we've got it to move now. There we go. I'll put him to one side, that's our passenger side one. With both wiper arms successfully removed, we can now remove the scuttle. So we're going to remove this bit of trim first. Follow that all the way along, off that pops. The panel is clipped into the bottom of the windscreen all the way along. So we're going to start from one end here and gently prise it away. It can take a bit of unclipping. Obviously we need to be careful because the scuttle trim is actually plastic, so we don't want to break that. But once we've got it moving, it should unclip okay. There we go, it's a bit of a clip. And off we come. With this side cleaned out, I can now get to the cover that covers the top of our suspension strut. And there we go. That's what we're after. This side, as you can see, has got the wiper linkage and motor in the way. So I'm going to remove that first. We've got a 10mm headed bolt here, here, and here. And then a plug just to undo from the wiper motor. Fairly straightforward. And that will allow us access to in there that also needs cleaning out by the looks of it. So the wiring loom for our wiper motor goes along the bulkhead and it's actually fixed onto little studs. So you can pull the wiring loom off of the studs and that gives us a little bit more room to be able to manoeuvre our wiper motor up and round. And that gives me access to the plug. And I can use my little screwdriver and then withdraw the plug. So our wiper assembly out the way. Take my bolts as well. And then we just need to clean in there and find the top of the strut that side. That's better. With all that muck gone, I can now grab the cover for the top of the strut and remove that. With a 21mm deep socket and quite a long bar, I can get quite good access to the top nut on our suspension strut. So I'm going to loosen it off. I'm not going to undo it all the way, but we're going to get it loose. Do both sides. Now with the smaller ratchet I can get in there and loosen it off a bit more. So I'm going to undo it as far as I can up the thread without taking the nut off. As you can see, the shock absorber this side has been leaking for some time. You see that's where all the oil's leaked out. And it's even been leaking enough for the dirt to stick to it and accumulate this crud here. So we're going to have to clean all that off too. Now with the wheel off, the next job is to get penetrating spray on everything we're going to undo. Next job is to get a wire brush on it and start cleaning these up. Now for some spray here. This is our wheel speed sensor. And this is our flexi brake hose. Once we've got a bit of spray on, with the use of a small screwdriver, I can now unplug our ABS or wheel sensor. To remove our brake caliper, first thing we need to do is to remove this spring here. Now it's sprung this way, so I'm going to give it a little push and a tap towards the front of the car, and it should pop out of its slot. Once that is removed, we can now turn the wheel. There's plastic caps on the back of the caliper. I'm going to loosen our slider bolts. Make sure you get a good purchase with the Allen key first, and we can undo it. So we can spin those out now, and then we can start removing the caliper. See, I've cable tied the caliper to the anti-roll bar. It just keeps it out of the way and takes the stress off the flexi hose. I'm going to remove the caliper carrier, but before I do that, I want to remove the retaining bolt for the disc. It's quite a weighty unit. Even if you're not changing your pads and discs, it's a good idea to remove the disc before you remove your strut. So I'm going to slide my trusty little lever bar. You can use a screwdriver in the top there. And what that's going to do is lock against our caliper carrier, and that means I can now undo this retaining bolt. This is a spline drive number 10. So let's just see if we can get any. Oh, wow, there she went. It's pretty tight. I was just about to say I'm going to have to do my old go tight and then reverse it, but we actually managed to back that out okay. Take that out. Next is to crack off our caliper carrier bolts. These are a 21mm, so I've got 21mm socket and a reasonable size bar. See if we can budge this. Yeah, there we go. See if we can budge the top one. Yeah, pretty tight, but we got them to move. Put that to one side. Next we can tap the disc off. Make sure you've got eye protection on because you don't want to be getting any of that corroded brake disc in your eye. Next, remove the backing plate for the brake disc. There's only 3 little 8mm headed bolts that hold this backing plate on, but it's worth undoing that and taking that off so we don't damage it when we're manhandling this on the bench. These little ones I am going to go tight first and then backwards because they look like they could snap off. There goes one. Remove the backing plate. It just saves any damage to this. Next is for us to spin out our hub nut. Now this is a 30mm multi-hex. I'm cheating, I'm using an impact wrench. So if you don't have an impact wrench available, I would suggest you need to undo this first with the wheel on the ground before you take any of the wheels off. Take the centre cap out of your wheel and then that'll give you access to be able to get a socket on there and a big bar, and then you can crack this right off and then jack your vehicle up. So our next job is to remove the anti-roll bar drop link from our strut. There's an 18mm nut here, and in the centre of the stud that comes through from the drop link is a T30. So I can put my 18mm on there, and as I undo, when the centre starts to turn, I can then put my T30 on there to steady it. There we go. And we may have to work it backwards and forwards, wire brush and some more penetrating fluid to get this off, because these they tend to be a very long stud and they tend to corrode quite well, as you can see. So we will need some wire brushing on that to get that off. Next we need to make sure that our drive shaft is free to move within the hub. So we're going to take our punch. This time we're going to use a softer punch. So this is like a brass punch or a phosphor bronze punch and a copper hide hammer. We're just going to gently try and drift that back, see if we can get some movement. That's as far as it will go for now. And then once we drop the hub away from the lower arm, we can then finish knocking that through. The reason we use a softer punch is because we do not want to damage that thread on that drive shaft. That'll be an utter nightmare if we can't get our hub nut back on. Next we're going to undo our track rod end nut. This is a 21mm, and then also we're going to undo our lower arm nut as well. This is also a 21mm. So we can use our ratchet and 21mm socket, or if you have an impact gun, you can use an impact gun to whiz them off. Again, make sure that they're clean, wire brushed off, and some nice penetrating spray on them. Actually, I'm going to clean them a bit more and give them another spray. What we have left to do now here is to remove our ball joints. So we have the hub here, which fits to the lower arm using a ball joint. Also the steering arm and track rod end, which fits to the hub using a ball joint. Now these ball joints are a tapered fit, so they have a taper that fits into a tapered hole. Now there's two ways to remove these. You can either use a ball joint removing tool, so you have a fork that goes in here and it applies pressure to the underside of the stud or the threaded part of our ball joint and forces it out. The other way is to use shock. So if you use shock, you need to put pressure on our steering arm, for instance, upwards, so a lever bar with a gentle amount of pressure. But then we need to hit directly on the end of this to create shock for it to loosen and actually be removed. So either way is just as effective. I've just put the nut on a couple of threads just to protect it, because obviously I'm going to tap with a hammer here and I don't want to touch the threads and damage the thread. So with a lever bar, I'm going to put my lever bar in here with a bit of upward pressure, and there we go. Lower ball joint. And spin a nut on just a couple of threads just to protect it so I can't hit the threads with my hammer. And now I'm going to hit this face here. The whole hub assembly is now free, so we're off of the lower arm. This is our ball joint. Again, we want to be careful we don't damage these rubber boots on the ball joints. Next I need to make sure that we can get the drive shaft out, like so. That came out nice and easy. And now all we've got left to do is just do the last nut, which is inside, and we can take this whole unit out. So this is the reason I didn't take that nut all the way off, otherwise our suspension strut would have fallen on the floor. Now all we need to do is, because it's loose, we can just wind it off with our fingers. I will need to take the weight of our suspension strut so I can remove that nut though. Now it comes to the bench. As you can see, I've got the whole strut assembly in the vise. Our next job is to remove the hub from our damper, because obviously the damper is the part we're replacing. So we're going to take the hub off first, and then we'll remove the road spring afterwards and swap over. So I need to undo these two bolts that go through the pinch part of our hub assembly. They pinch onto the bottom of the strut here. So again, you can use either a gun if you've got a gun, like I'm cheating and using the gun. Like so. If you don't, you can use your ratchet as well. Or two spanners if you don't have a ratchet. Okay, once these two pinch bolts are out, again we're going to try and get a wire brush around here, because we want to withdraw this assembly from the hub, so all the dirt from underneath needs to be removed. And then obviously a bit of magic spray as well. Again, just a light maintenance spray, whether it be a penetrating oil or a light oil, just to get some application in there to help us remove the hub. So using the lever bar, I'm just going to gently open up the hub assembly on the pinch part where the bolts go through, just to spread them open slightly. And then I can use our penetrating oil spray. And what that'll do is obviously get that around inside now. And if I use the lever bar on the top, I should be able to now move the, there you go, the strut assembly's moving around the hub, or the hub assembly's moving around the strut rather. Good, so we've got movement. So next we need to withdraw that. With our strut firmly clamped into our vise, again it doesn't matter if we damage this part now because we are changing that damper, but we want to remove our hub. So using my lever bar, I'm going to tap that into the end here where the two pinch bolts go through. And what that will do is spread that hub clamp open. You can use a chisel, or a lever bar and a soft hammer is just as good. Now I should be able to just withdraw our hub, there we go, off of our strut. And obviously make sure this is squeezed up tight in your vise. You don't want that catapulting off when you remove this, because this is quite a weight. There we go. As you see, I've turned our strut assembly round in the vise again, squeezing on the bottom again, doesn't matter if we damage that part. Now, we're going to use spring clamps because we need to compress our road spring. So I'm going to try and get this spring clamp on here. We want to try and squeeze the longest part of the spring if possible. It's no good just doing the centres because you don't always pull the spring in enough to be able to undo our nut. So we're going to go one there and then one opposite. Again, this one we will have to do on the shorter part of the spring. So now all we need to do is wind these down until it takes the pressure off of this top mount, and then we can undo that top mount, withdraw the spring and put it onto our new damper. Start winding it down. Most important thing is keeping it even. So a little bit at a time. You do not want to pull one side of the spring down and catapult that off before you've clamped it up. And just remember there's an awful lot of energy in these road springs, so we have to be very careful and make sure that the clamp's on correctly. Here we go. Now we've got a nice amount of movement. Now with our spring loose, I can undo our top mount on our suspension strut. So it's a 21mm spanner, a 7mm Allen key. Sometimes these are really tight, so you might want to use a gun to loosen the nut off. So there we go. Wow. Yeah, that's all right. It's not too bad. Yeah, just spin it up. Okay, so we want to keep this in order of removal. So the nut first. Then the top mount. There will be a bearing in here as well. And here. So keep those together. This is our bearing part. It's part of our sleeve as well. Sometimes you can pop these apart and pop a bit more grease in, but that feels okay. This bit holds the dust shield on for our damper. So again, with a little lever bar, I'm just going to lever that away from our spring. We should be able to pop it off the bottom here. Like so, and we'll draw the hole off. Awesome. So that's our spring, our dust cover, and this is our bump stop. So we're going to remove this and refit this to our new damper also. And then we have it, one useless damper. You can see all the oil's leaked out. It doesn't work at all. So we have our lovely new damper here. I'm going to clamp it in the vise across this part of the bracketry. That's pretty strong. I'm not going to clamp it in extremely tight because we only need it to nip it up while I put the spring on. So we're using original equipment specification Bilsteins. Great value for money. So let's get this spring fitted. Right, so let's remove our nuts. First thing to pop on is our bump stop. Nice tight fit, getting down to the bottom. Lovely. Now we can slide our spring assembly on. And the spring and the dust cover at the same time. Now the spring has a locator. I'll show you up close in a moment. Right, so that's sat in its location. Dust covers over. Right, next. Next we have our bearing. So that fits on top of there. That's our bearing, so when we turn, it turns nicely. And then next we can put our top mount on. So our top mount goes on and sits through the centre of that. And then we can start spinning the nut on. Let's get the nut done up nice and tight. So again, we've got to have our Allen key in there and our spanner. Right, good, nice and tight. Once we've got that nut tight, we can now start slackening off our spring clamps. With our new damper spun over and clamped back in the vise across that bracket, he's not going anywhere. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop a bit of grease on our bottom of our strut. The reason I'm doing that is to aid the hub going back on, and to obviously offer a little bit of protection for corrosion in the future. Again, make sure that the hub is nice and clean inside here. If it's not, use a bit of emery paper or whatever you have to hand, to a wire brush to clean out all the corrosion from in here. Make sure that's clean. As you can still see, we've still got our lever bar in there spreading the clamp at the moment, so that's going to help. So we should be able to just sort of start sliding on. So get it fed on. There we go. And we'll gently work our way down. And we've got to line up with this part of the strut here. There's a tag on here, so this tag actually goes through and our first bolt locates through it. So once we're nearly there. Okay, we're pretty close, so I'm going to give it a tap with a rubber mallet just to finish off so it's all the way home. Support the hub as well. Okay, so that's gone all the way home and it's seated on the bottom of our hub now. So we can lift out our lever bar and then just centralise our hub again. So I want to be in the centre of that tang, which we are. And then we can get our pinch bolts back through and get them done up. So we'll pop our pinch bolts through. We've actually got new replacement pinch bolts. It does state in the manual to replace these if we remove them. Stop with that. Also, the torque settings for these do vary, so do check the gross vehicle weight of your van and then check that against the manual to see what torque settings you require. With our pinch bolts correctly torqued, this is now ready to pop back onto Steve's van. Ready to put the complete strut back in. As you can see, I've got an axle stand on the lower arm and I've brought that lower arm just past horizontal. The idea of that is so I can lift my strut and sit this part on top of the arm while I try and get the top through for our top mount. So we've got our top mount poking through now. So that means I can get this part on and the nut on, in theory, with a little lift. And now I can take the vehicle back up, get rid of the axle stand and we can start fitting the strut. Next, obviously I've spun the nut up a little bit on there, so we've still got a good amount of movement. Next I need to get the drive shaft through back into the hub. First I'm going to put some copper grease on the splines on the drive shaft to aid it coming through. It was very dry before, so let's pop a bit of grease on there. We love a bit of copper grease. Right, good. So now I'm going to see if I can wrestle that into position. There we go. Right, so that's our drive shaft pushed through our hub. Next thing to do is we're going to spin the nut on so it doesn't fall out. I've got a new nut for that. You should change these hub nuts every time you undo them. So I've got a new one. Let's grab that. I'm just going to spin that on by hand for the minute just to stop the drive shaft falling out. We can tighten that in a bit. Next we need to drop the lower arm down to get our lower ball joint located and then we can spin that nut up. Let's get a big lever bar. So this is our lower ball joint that we need to get back into our lower arm. Now our lower arm is under tension, so we need to drop it down with a big lever bar. You can see there was a convenient hole in the arm. I've put a nut and bolt through so I can rest my lever bar up against this and it won't slip. I'll show you what I mean. So I can now slide my lever bar in. I can go under the subframe and then the heel part of my lever bar is not going to slip. So when I push down, I'm not going to slip down the arm. And that will actually allow us to drop the arm down enough to be able to pop that lower ball joint in. Okay, it is a little bit of a fiddle, but let's get it in. So let's say lever bar's in place. So I can push down on that quite happily. I can bend our lower ball joint into position. Like so. And then release my lever bar and now the ball joint is located in the lower arm. So what we need to do now is get the nut on the bottom and tighten it up. Next we can pop our nut on the lower arm ball joint. Okay, we can drop our track rod end in now. Same deal, that's a tapered seat. So put the nut on. Again, I'm putting a little bit of downward pressure on that taper to seat it together. There we go. Next we can pop our drop link back through the strut and fit our nut. We go back to our Torx 30 and our 18mm spanner. Before I forget, I must remove the bolt that we put through to aid with our lever bar. We can now put back on the backing plate for the disc. Remember our 3 little 8mm headed bolts. Next we take the wire brush and clean up our hub assembly. A little bit of copper grease. Ready to pop our nice new shiny disc on. Just remember, these are really heavily oiled, so they will need degreasing before we put the brake pads in. So we get the retaining bolt and pop him in. Then next it's our caliper carrier or caliper yoke. And then always double check with your manufacturer's specifications for torque settings. They do vary from vehicle to vehicle slightly, depending on what size brakes you've got and what weights your vehicle can carry. Degrease time. I've cut the cable tie for our brake caliper. I've got him set up here upside down. I'm just going to push the piston back with these large set of pliers. That was front shock absorber replacement on a T6 transporter. For more how-to videos and maintenance tips, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or check us out at justkampers.com. Thanks for watching.